Hey guys, it's me, Mike Taylor. So, video for today for ARC 316. I was thinking to kind of elaborate further on our little exercise that we did last week in terms of the 3D section. I got a bunch of questions regarding two things. I got to try and cover the one thing today, and I'll see if I've got time to cover the second thing. Really, it's about masses. So some of you got really, excited and genuinely, interested in getting some of these masses into our models. Those are great. Those are great in a design development phase and, get the look and feel of your building, nice and tight, looking good. But ultimately what happens is, as you see in D&D 4 is now somebody says, I need a wall section, or I need a detail, or I need you to, can you cut away part of the building and show me how that piece is actually built? So part of this is more, again, I always try and wax philosophical a little bit about drawing inside Revit. And the second piece will be how to get it kind of to a more usable piece. And I'm not, there are many different ways to do this. I reached out to a couple other instructors to see how they might teach this. And this is my version, and you might have different ideas how to do it. What I'm going to get into is fairly complicated, so don't feel like you must do it this way. And what I'll do is I'll show you kind of like what I would do and then give you some examples of what you could do in place of this. So without any further ado, let's go to the Revit stream here. And this is our little project. So if you remember last week, we kind of started just with the section box, getting, very similar model right to last week. So getting our kind of shot through the building. And what I had said in last week's video was that it would be important for us to cut through the building in the most representative sections, right? So the most representative sections. In this case, I might actually suggest, rather than cutting through our kind of common wall assembly here, we might want to cut through this little piece. And this is exactly what the question was about was, I built this mass. Do I have to rebuild the whole model? Panic, right? So it depends. It depends on what you want to show. It depends on what you want to get out of Revit. This is all a big question of it depends. So the first thing that I would do is I'll just show you why this doesn't work. Why this doesn't work. And I don't want anybody to get upset that it doesn't work. This is just massing is really good to get an idea of what you're doing, and then ultimately we've got to start to think about the way like you guys do it in M&M, methods and materials and methods. How does a building come together, and what are these pieces? How are we going to build it? So, part of the responsibility of the people drawing the buildings, us, is that number one, we can get the design on the page, and that's wonderful. I can see here if I just pull out my section box here, it says wonderful little articulated facade with some backup in here. We've got some floors, some walls, a wonderful little colonnade below, right? If I just come around here. But Revit really, we'll say it has challenges with masses. So, this person has done such a great job modeling all of these extrusions, all of these wonderful pieces of architecture within our kind of facade here. A lot of work has been put into this, right? So we can, even modify little pieces here. So little pieces of the facade we can start to play around with. And that's great. It's going to undo that real quick. Where it gets really complicated is this corner piece. So I'll show you why that's really complicated. It's kind of like a dual taper, I would say. And the reason that's complicated, I'll get to in a little bit. But most of this, I think I've got an idea how we can generate. And then that corner piece is especially difficult. But I've got some workarounds for us. So what I'll do is I'll kind of get most of the way there. I know we only get an hour or so to do this, so we'll do our best. backing all the way up. I think I showed this last week, but I'll show it again anyways. Section box, we pull it across, and when we pull it across, you can see, okay, we still got part of the wall here, still got part of the wall. And then suddenly, once I move into the mass, I'm gonna keep going here, we're gonna see that Revit kind of loses the plot a bit. So I'm gonna come all the way across. And it doesn't really know what you wanna see, right? So if I select this mass, you could see that it's this whole bit, right? So the way this has been modeled, it's kind of like, think about all of the edges of this mass is now what Revit is trying to cut through. So if I keep coming across here, it's just really hard to understand. I'm going to come across with the section box. Really hard to understand what's trying to be represented here. You know, if you're going to get this on a sheet, it's going to be really hard to represent, you know, where does the envelope start? Where is your structure? Where are the pieces of the building? And so on. Really hard, really complicated. So, a couple ways to do this. What I would do, you know, how fast do we want to work, right? So how fast do we want to work? What do we need to get done? So for me, honestly, this is just a personal preference, back to philosophy. I would probably just throw this in SketchUp and crack it out. I get it done as quickly as possible and concentrate on really getting my section, my 2D section up to snuff. The 3D, you know, we can get away with a little bit of fakery and fun and all this stuff, but you could see the more that I cut through this, it doesn't really help me, right? I'm not really getting any more information. It wants to see that full mass all the way through. Not super helpful. That being said, you know, once we've cut this, we can start to apply, you know, if we've got a little 2D section. So if I jump to create a 2D section through the same mass wall assembly, what we can do is start to add in detail and take away the mass, get our profiles in there, right? So the challenge here is, how much do I want to show in my 3D versus how much do I want to show in my 2D? So I don't know explicitly what's being asked for from you guys for D&D 4. Again, how I would do it is probably be a little bit more loose on the 3D and a little bit more particular with the 2D. So what am I going to show in 3D? What am I going to show in 2D? So I'm going to just jump to, let's see if we've got do I have a sheet? I do have a sheet. So, okay, I've already messed with my view. Wonderful. So this is my bad. I should probably... This is what happens when you mess with the 3D view that your partner is working on instead of duplicating that view. So I've just done the bad thing. Don't do it this way. So really what we want to do is we want to make sure we duplicate that view before we even touch anything. So that's my bad. Anyhow, that's okay. So I'll leave that off to the side for now. We'll fix that later. I think, is this cut through? No, it's not. So I'm going to double check where our section is cut, and I'm going to try and cut it through our mass. Let's see what we get. So I'm going to jump to the floor plans over here. Let's jump to the first floor, see if I can find. Interesting. Okay. Excuse me. I don't know where it is. So what I'm going to do is, I don't think I've showed you guys this, little tips and tricks. So if you're like, where the heck is this view? Where is this view taken from? What we can do is we can right click, hit activate view, right click again, and we're looking for the find referring views. Go to the first floor, open that view, and now it should have the section highlighted, right? Perfect. So it's a way for us to understand where is the section that I'm looking at, where does it live? I'm actually going to jump up to this, let's jump up to the third floor here, see if we can find it. Okay, so it doesn't really show up. Where is our mass? Where is our mass? It looks like there's already been some work here to turn off the masses. So if I just double check here, let's see if our masses are on, they're off. Let's hit OK here. So some of this stuff is turned off, which is almost exactly what I would suggest for you to do if you've done it this way. The masses, I don't want to say they get in the way, but they can be challenging. I know that it looks like there's some kind of, I don't want to say fake walls, but there's some walls that we've built in here. Anyhow, let's keep going here. So I really need to grab a new section. So I'm just going to grab a section. Let's actually draw it the other way. Let's do this way and then we'll flip it. I want to see what's happening through that section. So pop this up. Let's right click, go to the view. We will make it, is it 1 to 25, 1 to 50? Gotta remind myself, 1 to 25. Let's do this real quick. And we'll make this medium. So what shows up here? Not a lot. So I'm going to get back into my masses here. I'm pretty sure masses are off. Let's hit OK here. So, right. So what do we want to do? We want to kind of cut the bottom off. We'll probably cut this all the way down. Bring this across. We're just cropping out, pieces of the building that maybe we don't want to show. I'm going to hide all this for now. So hide category, get rid of that. So something wonderful about this is, the masses here, right? We can see the little pieces that we're trying to get to when it comes to the actual overall building assembly. And this can be a wonderful way to start to add detail into that mass section. So nice little way to do this. One thing, when I was first starting out was my boss would say, I want you to draw the profile of the building. So what are we cutting through? And in lots of ways, what we're cutting through is, make a nice fat line here, all the way up. It's not even fat enough. So I know, for instance, that there's this really nice kind of proscenium, this little piece that comes out. And then there's another piece down here that pushes out through the glass, unfortunately, but we could take a look at that a little bit closer. And then there's another piece down here. So, if it was me, I would start to block out what are the pieces that I need to get into my building that I really want represented appropriately for this precast building. So the reason I didn't get into this last week is because this is actually a fairly complicated, even just a geometry to build out a precast. You can do it. It's just complicated. So what's going to happen now, if I come back to our 3D, copy 3D section, we can imagine we're cutting a section somewhere here. We see these pieces, right? There's not a lot of geometry. It's just fairly complicated when it comes to trying to build this in Revit. So the mass is a great start. And then what we can do is we can start to imagine how would we actually build this in 3D. So what do you guys think? So what tools have we used that exist inside of Revit that could potentially build this little wall with these little panels and all these little pieces in here, right? So we've got quite a few things going on here. I'm just going to hide these for now. Quite a few things going on. We've got these kind of vertical bands, this horizontal band, wonderful piece here, this kind of screen element, right? And believe it or not, what I would suggest is building the whole thing out of curtain wall, right? So, if it's me, let's just do a real quick, see if I can sketch pad on us for us. So pull this up. Imagine I jump back to our piece here. Let's do a little snipping tool. So you're in the office, you're hanging out. Somebody says to you, I need you to draw this for me in Revit. And you say, no, sure, no problem. What are some of the first steps we want to do? Can I? Oh, it's just going to be an off on. That's okay. Whoops. Can I zoom in? Zoom in a little bit. Up is down and down is up. Everything's topsy-turvy in here. That's okay. So if I'm going to build this inside of Revit, I've got a couple things that I need to think about. So when I've got my my curtain wall set up, typically what we see is just a couple pieces of glass, some panels, maybe you got some spandrel panels in there, and then our mullions. And that's it, right? So that's it. So, but why don't we back off? Why don't we think about it instead of spandrel panels? What if each of these little pieces becomes a spandrel, right? So what if this becomes a spandrel? What if this becomes a spandrel, this little piece in here? What if this piece becomes a spandrel? right? So we can actually build little spandrels across the project. And I'm going to show you a little bit what this looks like. So imagine now these spandrels, we actually have to split them, right? So we're actually going to have a mullion or mullions don't necessarily have to be just mullions. They can just be joints or gaps within our panel system. So imagine that this is a little piece, this is a little piece, and we're actually going to start to split up our assembly into these little panelized sections. So curtain wall is really just a set of panels. It's just a set of panels. The complicated part is figuring out how many panels do we need to represent all of these different conditions. So right off the bat, full disclosure, I've already took a swing at this. We've got a lot of panels. So we got to have the top panel. We got to have these vertical panels. We got to have these edge panels where they kind of come through the floor. We got to have vertical panels that are just kind of flat. Lots of things happening. So, and then we also got the glass, right? We also got the glass. So super quick, why don't I just show you how far I got, and then I'll try and take you through there as quick as I can. So remember, this is our kind of end game, right? This is where we're trying to get to. And what I've done, I'm going to close the rest of these actually. Let's close these, cancel. What I've done in the interest of time, having only an hour or so, I'll give some examples of what we're after here and try and get you guys a little bit further along. So, ta-da! So, this is a panelized curtain wall system. So essentially, when we're used to using curtain wall, right, it's usually just spandrel panels, glass panels, mullions. So if we don't remember how to do that, I'm going to start from scratch, but I do want to show you kind of how these panels operate. So the difference here, the big key difference is if I'm going to cut through this piece of geometry here, way more detail, right? So even just that little profile there, we can see or imagine what we're going to see is this little precast element that's kind of popping out. And we have a nice little curtain wall mullion surround for the window. Should be one down here too. But let's just do that real quick. We'll give ourselves a little mullion. But that all being said, if we start to look at this, I'm just going to jump back to our 3D section, this one. Jump back to our 3D section for 1 second. I'm going to pull it forward and just concentrate really on a kind of key portion of our building. Jump back to this. So what do we see? What do we see, right? We've got the kind of vertical face, this face up here. This corner, really challenging. This corner is really challenging. These vertical pieces, horizontal pieces. And that's how we build it. So you can see here, whoops, close that real quick. You can see here, if we're gonna, I wonder if I can compare them side by side. Let's do it that way. Oops. Remember tile windows, guys. Window tile, WT. And now I can kind of show you real quick what's happening, right? So what is happening on the right, we've got a mass. So these are all little masses. It's all one contiguous thing. Over here, we have curtain wall. So the curtain wall section is essentially, we've gotten all these panels. So this is a panel, this is a panel, this is a panel, and they are all different. Actually, these two panels are the same, but these two panels are the same. And then vertically, right, we've got this piece is this piece, and so on and so forth. So what we need to do is make sure that when we're building this, that we have all of our panels set up, and then we actually need to go into Revit and tell it which panels we want to be represented each way. I realize this is a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back all the way out, and I'm going to start with a standard curtain wall. I'll start with a template just so we can, refresh ourselves if we're in the moment of trying to get to something that makes sense for curtain wall, strictly speaking. And then we'll just build on that. We'll get deeper and deeper. And what I can do is I'll share this file so you guys can have the kind of pieces that make this all come together. You're welcome to modify the families and all that fun stuff. But I got a word of caution, word to the wise. This is a very complicated little piece of Revit. And I don't want anybody to get lost in the complexity of it. If it is overwhelming, pause, take a break, and don't fret, because this massing version is also totally adequate, in my opinion, for most things that you're going to be doing in Revit until you want to get to a kind of construction level detail, 100% construction document style of drawing, which is more like the thing on the left, right? Look at that. Pretty sweet. So pull it all the way up. And let's get started. So first things first, tile my window. I'm just going to go all the way back. I'm going to go new project. I'm going to open up a little architectural template. And for those of us that don't remember how to use curtain wall, I'm going to jump straight to curtain wall empty. And it's going to draw myself a little curtain wall. Actually, this has nothing in it. So I want to see, just do exterior glazing. Oops, TW. And I can see here I've got some little gaps, right? So if we remember how to use curtain wall, that's great. And if you don't, that's what we're here for, right? So we do a little tutorial on this. So I'm going to try and just make this a little smaller, something like this, just representative of, oh, I made it angled. Careful with that. We want it to be flat. I think that's right. First things first, what do we want to do? I'm going to jump to my standard 3D view just to see what we've drawn here. Wonderful little piece of curtain wall hanging out. We've got some constraints set up. And remember that we've got a couple different portions of what makes a curtain wall a curtain wall. We've got the curtain grid, right? So the curtain grid is up here. We can add grids where we want to, right? Add little grids. We've got the overall height of the curtain wall, right? So we can change that. We can change the location of where these grids live, right? And sometimes you can't change them, and careful with this little pin here. So if we uncheck that, we can change the location. Give it to me. It's not going to let me. There we go. So careful with those pins. Pins can be good to set things in, kind of pin them to where we want them to go. Some other things. So if I jump into my edit type here, you're going to see a whole bunch of other stuff. And right now we've got vertical layout, horizontal layout with the spacing. So we got fixed distance. So for us, I actually think we're probably going to just be, I can't tell from the example we've got, but there should be a module, right? So say your grids are 6 meters apart, then or 9 meters apart, you have a module of 3,000 or 1,500 or 1 meter. And it's really nice to use that spacing to kind of start to govern what we're after. So I'm going to actually redraw this a little bit differently, and curtain wall empty looks good. And draw it in plan, make sure I don't have any issues here. So draw it in plan, blam. Change it real quick to my exterior glazing. And now if I edit the type real quick, I'm going to change this spacing just for now. Let's change it to, I always get this confused. So I think it's the minimum spacing, and we'll set it to 1,500. Let's do something like this, minimum spacing, and let's see what we get. So it should jump, right? If we set this to, let's set it to 9,000 as a kind of standard grid bay. And now what we're going to see is each kind of constituent piece of our grid, 1,500, right? So it's Revit is saying, I got you. I know exactly what you want me to do. Whoops, wrong one. I know exactly what you want me to do. I've got 1,500 in each, in the kind of horizontal direction. So the vertical grid direction. So 1,500. Maybe the other direction, I can say none, for example. Okay. Let's not do this. Let's just do this a different way. We can always add and delete and mess with this once we're done. It's just nice to kind of have a starting point. So I'm going to leave this at 1,500. That's cool. Vertical mullions. So these are the mullions, right? So the mullions we should have on our building. in terms of what our curtain wall system sections look like. And built into Revit, we got rectangular mullion 50 by 150, and the horizontal mullions, let's do the same thing, 50 by 150, and I want to show you this real quick. Now we've got horizontal mullions and vertical mullions. So if you've seen these before, this is an Alumacor, Conair, some sort of curtain wall system section that we've got as part of the building. But you will notice that there's no surround. There's no surround here, right? Real quick, let's just jump back in, and we're going to notice our border types here. So I usually just set these all the same. Keep it, quad, excuse me. I gotta make sure I put the right one. Rectangular, 50 by 50, 50 by 150, rectangular, 50 by 150. We can always change these later, but just so you guys can see what's happening. So, blam, part 2. So one thing I still see on projects from this semester, last semester, every semester, my time in the office, is people, for whatever reason, really like the idea of having these mullions on the outside of the building. So when I say outside, I mean outside the enclosure. So this is a support for your glass. This is a support for the glazing that's going to go on your building. So when we're thinking about what's happening in real life, what we want to see is those mullions on the inside. They're the support for our building. So if you're ever in a situation where you just need to flip it, so if I jump back to my, I just hit spacebar, right? So in this case, this little panel here, this is towards the outside of the building. So I just want everybody to know that that's towards the outside of the building. Is this one? Cool. So mullions, we've got mullions, panels, grids. Lots of stuff with curtain walls, probably some of the most complicated bits of Revit. The last thing I want to get to here are the panels themselves. So if I jump here, and I'm going to remember our tab select. If I tab, why isn't it giving to me? I'm trying to get to the panels here. There we go. Man, so weird. There's a couple different panels that kind of come pre-baked inside of Revit. Those are the glaze panel and there's a name for it. Solid, sorry, it's just system panel, glazed and solid. Glazed and solid. So if we tab select, we can actually just modify these. I'm going to change this from glazed to solid. Blam, right? And now that would be, Revit's lame attempt at what a spandrel panel might look like. I could go ahead and select all of these, hit filter, go to curtain wall panels, hit OK, and change those from glaze to solid in my type selector. And lo and behold, I've got the top bit, all little spandrel panels, the bottom bit, all little glass panels. We could go ahead and we could even introduce other, if we want to introduce some other curtain grids in here, right? Maybe we do another one up here. So wonderful, right? We can also adjust these in, if I tab select, you have to remember that the grids are separate from the mullions. So the grids themselves we can move, and the mullions are their own thing. So if I tab select to the mullion, maybe I want to get rid of this mullion, I can delete it. So you got to make sure that you unpin. So what I did there was tab select, and then you'll see a pin. And if it looks like this, you're going to hit delete and you go, why can't I delete this? You got to unpin it and you got to delete it, for example. All the way to our mutual friends project. How do we get these panels to do something more fun than they're currently doing? So we need to get, the panels themselves to do something more like this. And my example, what I'd like to do for us is we'll build a couple panels, and then you guys could try and mess around with the panels that I've got set up. We'll try and build this one. Why don't we do a vertical one? A horizontal one, and we'll build a little vertical one. And then I'll call it, because I feel like just to give us some memory of what it's like to use families inside of Revit. It's a really advanced kind of topic using these curtain wall systems. Using these curtain wall tool. So let's see if we can get into it though. So jump to 3D, and what you will see is if we drop these down, I can come all the way down here to. Where's my curtain wall panel? So curtain panels, and we should see system panel. We're going to see glazed and solid, and that's it. That's all we've got. So what I actually need to do is open up the curtain wall family and do a save as. So this is just how I've done it. I'm sure that there were other ways to do it. I just wanted to make sure I keep the geometry completely separate in every panel that I've got. So back to this idea of what are the panels I need to build. You may need to draw 1 panel or 2 panels or 8 panels or 42 panels, and certainly there are other tools inside of Revit that we're not going to get into that can help you build these panels. But for now, what I'd love to do is build two panels for us, and then I'll just kind of get away with how we can start that process for getting our double tapered curtain wall assembly there. Okay, cool. So file open. So what we need to do is we actually need to scroll into our, yours won't have any of these. These are all from me. You should have I think this is right. M solid panel. That's correct. M solid panel, M glazed panel, and M empty panel. So M, of course, is metric. If I just go up here, take us all the way up. So remember, we're in US. We're going to go curtain wall panels, and now we are in the kind of standard Revit families. If you downloaded the 2024 families from the Revit, the Autodesk Revit website. If you didn't, I'm not exactly sure where they live, excuse me. But what we're going to do is, what I would do is we're going to right click, we're going to copy this or duplicate it. So right click, copy, and I'm just going to paste a new one in here. And let's just call this M solid panel test. It's not going to let me test at RFA. It's going to update it, going to hang out with it. And this is it. Right? This is it. So just in the interest of not causing any confusion, I'm going to try and organize this a little bit. So in the interest of not causing any confusion, now we've got one panel, and I would like to load it into this. So what do we want to do? Let's do the first one. Let's do the one that's kind of, what I'd like to do first is, if I jump back to my sketchpad, what I'd like to do is grab what's going to be at the edge here. It's going to be this panel. And in my mind, what that's going to look like is an extrusion. So remember, our panels typically look like this, right? So there's a mullion here and a mullion here for our curtain wall. For us, we want a mullion here, and then actually we need to have some sort of geometry. Something like this. Doesn't have to be, perfect when we're just trying stuff out. But imagine that we've got a panel, a vertical panel that's going to be extruded up, right? So this panel, just a simple extrusion. This panel, simple extrusion. But the challenge is we have to start with a new family. So we've duplicated this family, and I'll kind of get into what that looks like. So Autodesk family, if I jump to my views on the left here, if you remember how to use families from last class, the first thing that I noticed when I was building this is the thickness is really, it just has to go away. And this will catch most of us because it caught me the first thing. I wasn't really paying attention. I just went ahead and deleted this. But that doesn't actually get rid of the thickness, right? Do we remember how to get rid of thickness? It is a parameter. So we're going to jump up to the family parameters up here. And I'm actually going to delete the thickness because I actually don't want that thickness. I want it to be more, it's a more complicated geometry. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to right click, right click. How did I delete this last time? Oh, down here. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to delete the parameter, hit OK. It's going to give me a warning. I thought it was going to give me a warning. Looks like it doesn't care. Cool. Delete this little piece here. And now what do we have? What do we have here? I've already forgotten which way is the correct up and down. That's okay. We can build it and then swap it afterwards. Probably helpful to do it twice anyway. So this is an extrusion. So if we remember from 252 or from maybe 316, when we've got these massing elements, these extrusions living within our family, I'm just going to jump to a 3D view and kind of let's see what we've got here. So this is it. This is, remember our little extrusion. That's all we got. We just got a little extrusion. In this case, it's a simple rectangular piece. And what we want to do is rather than that rectangle, we're going to go and make it much more like this bad boy right here. So how do we do that? We are going to click on the family, and I'm going to edit the extrusion. Edit the extrusion. I'm just going to go ahead and make some stuff up right now. Let's just do it this way. Okay, I think this is right. Let's just do it this way. We'll try it out. So which version did I want to do first? I'm just going to delete it all. Now, I need to have a starting point, right? So I got a starting point somewhere, and I am going to make this 1000 up, and then let's call it 125 across. And then over here, we're going to start with 125, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's all cool. And then I'm actually going to offset. So remember, offset is OF, or you can come up here to the modify panel here, offset. And I'm going to offset it by 125. If I tab select, I can get everything together. Blam. And then going to make sure everything has to be in a perfect loop. So let's not forget that part. If I hit check mark, let's see if we've got any errors. Looks pretty darn good. But I know it's not correct. So there's all sorts of things that are wrong with this, and I'm going to try and explain them as best I can. If we remember all the way back from our families here, what are some things that I probably want to make sure that I've got nailed down here? The first is I've got the kind of left side of my panel, and then I got the right side of my panel, right? So the first thing I might want to do is make sure I've got let's call this left side panel. And then let's make sure we got a right side panel. I'm going to rename this right side panel. And then I'm going to rename this back of panel. And so that's cool. And then what I want to make sure that I lock my pieces here. So I'm going to actually drag this, and just so that it hovers over here, remember we got to hit our little lock symbol. Similarly over here, I'm going to back this off. I'm going to come back to my working plane or my reference plane and lock that down. Cool, right? What else do I need to do? Well, if I want to make sure that in 3 dimensions, that this dimension right here stays 125, I should probably link it to my reference plane, which is my left side. I'll lock that. Do the same thing over here, reference plane to an inner dimension, and I'm going to lock that. And then the actual thickness across the board here, and I should lock that. What else are we missing? Right? What else are we missing here? We have to remember we're working in 3D. So because we're working with these curtain wall families, we have to remember all edges of the mullion. So all edges of the mullion, and what does that actually look like, right? So if I've got that, how does that operate? If I jump back to my 3D view, looks the part getting pretty close to what we want. However, it's wrong. I know it's wrong. I'm going to jump to elevations here. So let's jump to the left elevation. Oh, actually, it's not wrong. Let's see what we got. What we want to do is make sure that it is linked to the top. This is the kind of top piece of the panel, right? So I'm going to back this off. Okay, it was actually constrained. So that's good. But what I want to do is just make sure I don't want any tricks. I'm going to lock that. Wonderful. So this is just the test. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to load it into curtain wall test assembly, which is something I've already got loaded here, but let's just see what it looks like. So I'm going to, no, it's not. Let's load it into project 2. Excuse me. Let's load it into project 2. Hit OK. And now if I jump to my 3D of my project 2, remember we've got this. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just select one of these panels. Come on, panel. And now I should, if I go into my type selector menu, I should see a new panel. And it is my solid panel test. So let's see what we've got here. If I back this off just a little bit, let's see what we've got. Right? So, you can start to imagine. Of course, this is on the wrong side, because of course it is. So if I tab select in here, I can select this panel. I can select, is this going to be another panel? Nope. Select 2 of these panels. Whoops. And now, like our other panels, if we wanted to make this all solid, that's cool. But what if we wanted to make it a shape. And that's really what we're after here is making this a compelling, solid shape for part of our construction here, right? So look at that. Fantastic, right? If we want to get rid of the little gap here, I would actually prefer probably for now you guys keep these gaps or at least modify them so that they show a kind of gap between the panels. If you do absolutely want to get rid of it, you're going to untap that little pin and you're going to hit delete. You know, untap that little pin and hit delete. So of course, this is not the right side. This, in fact, is going to be on, you know, in our example here, it's the one that's all the way on the other far side. So I wouldn't actually delete this. I would probably copy it because what's going to happen is we still need this panel anyways. I've just drawn it the wrong way. So, right, we still need this panel way down here. So what do we actually need to do? I got to flip it. I got to flip this panel so that it comes down the other way. So real quick here, let's just go ahead and do that. I am going to, let's do a file save as, and we'll do a file save as here, family. And what you're going to do, what you're going to notice is that we're going to be very smart about how we label these. So one will be left, one will be right. This one technically is the right side. So I need to do, excuse me, this is the left side. So I need to do one for the right. So right. What do I need to do? I got to flip this whole gosh darn thing. So I'm going to try and flip it. Let's see if Revit will just let me flip it. Unlikely. Let's see what happens. Is that going to work? Is that going to work? I hope this works, but let's see. I'm going to load in the project. Let's do a little project test. I guarantee you something will not be working. Something is wrong. I can feel it. Test, and you can see test right. Aha! So you can see automatically some things came in all right. Some things did not come in all right. So we can see here that the panel is not coming all the way up to where would be our reference plane, which in this case is our mullion. So I actually need to come back into our family. So especially in this case, we got to be very careful with where we're building these panels because you're going to have like 8 different types: top, bottom, left, right, center, center right, whatever, corner right. And what that means is we got to be careful with naming, and then we also got to be careful with how the geometry works. So test right. Okay, same one, just making sure on the top here. So the constraint was not there, right? So usually what happens is when I move this little arrow down, I should see a constraints are not satisfied. So if I hit this little lock here, now it is linked to this top of panel. Really, this should also say top of panel. So now if I try and modify this, it's going to say constraints are not satisfied, right? So I can either remove those constraints because I don't want them, or I can leave them. So I'm going to hit cancel. We want to leave the constraints on. That's the locking little piece there. I'm going to go ahead and load it into my family here. Load 2. I'm going to override it. It's okay. Override it. I'll jump to the 3D view here, and we should see, yes, we do. We see this piece now come up, right? Wonderful. Tips and tricks. I know you guys really love tips and tricks here. So when we actually get into building these panels, we can start to kind of, if you remember, match attributes or match properties. If I type MA real quick on my keyboard, I can actually tab select and I can start to pick panels that I want to swap out here. And, just really helps speed things up if you're trying to do something really nice and rad in your design work, right? So, well, that's cool, right? So now we've got these kind of 3 panels in here. I can see here I've got some challenges with my mullions. So maybe I want to delete these real quick. Unpin, delete. Whoops. Unpin, delete. Just trying to give us some ideas, guys. So, unpin, delete. Oh, I'm deleting the wrong ones. Ah, damn. Of course I did. I deleted the wrong ones. I'll do that real quick. These are the ones I want to delete. What a goof. Oops. Just give us some ideas. Maybe you really don't want those little joints to show up. I would argue that you need them, but depending on what you're after here, we've got a nice little facade starting to come together. And the nice part about these families is you'll notice, whoops, just do this last one here. You'll notice that if I'm going to start to mess around with my curtain wall grids, everything is going to stay intact. So this is the big benefit of using curtain wall grids, is that now instead of it being a kind of family, like a mass, every time I modify my curtain wall grids, it should update based on the family parameters that I've set. So different example, what if I want to, somebody said to me, I really wanted to, instead of 1500, I really want my grid spacing to be something else. So remember, we can set this right now, everything is locked. If I want to go back and I can globally change it, or I can change it kind of piece by piece. I come in here, edit type, and jump down to my vertical grid spacing. So let's go to 1000 instead and see what happens. Hit OK, right? And those wonderful fins are now all still hanging out. Look at that. Different way, we can select all of them, go to our filter, check none, click the curtain wall panel, come down here, go to, where's my, oh, right. I can go to my right or my test panel, go the other way, right? Ta-da, go the other way. So why does this matter? Well, certainly speaking, what's going to happen is now when I cut through this section, if I keep coming here, in 3D, I've got some physical geometry that I can actually see. If I cut a vertical section, if I'm coming through this way, I've got quite a bit of geometry happening here, right? All of these fun things. Okay, what else do we want to do? So maybe we want to build a different one. Maybe we want to build one that comes across in this dimension. So maybe we want to build one that comes, these panels over here. And how do we do that, right? So similarly, we've got vertical, vertical, vertical. And then what we want to do is build a piece that's going to come across the horizontal panels inside of Revit. So we want them to come this way. So very similarly, I'm actually going to just jump back into our family. Is this open? Yeah, this is open. That's okay. Close this. And what we can do is we can use this same family, but what we're going to do is just modify it a little bit. I could see some weirdness with the geometry. I'm going to see if I can fix that, actually. It's going to bother me otherwise. So what do we need to do? We really want, okay, so that 125 is happening. 125 is happening. I wonder if it's going to help me if I do it this way. Let's see if we can lock that. I think this might crash our model. So let's see what we get. All right. Is it good? Is it happening? Oops. Oh, I closed it. Gosh darn it. So something that we'd have to work on this a little bit, but it's unfortunately it's getting closer to the piece. I'm just trying to figure out why it's not. It should be perfect. Why is it not perfect? Maybe it's the offset. Cancel. I have a feeling it's the offset in there. So what do I want to do? Maybe I can delete this real quick. Gonna let me? Let's see if it's gonna let me do this. I'm gonna do something real quick. I didn't try this before, so let's see if we can do it this way. Delete parameter offset. Let's try and load this again, and hopefully it doesn't freak out on us. Same problem. Okay, that's okay. So I can't fix that right now, but we're getting pretty close to what I was planning on getting to. So second piece is, let's see if we can get this horizontal piece coming in here. What do we need to do for that? We're actually going to need to build it a little bit differently. So if we think about the way that we built the family before, that is a vertical extrusion, right? So we're looking at something in plan and then extruding up. In this case, we actually need to extrude across, right? So real quick, let's see what that looks like if we're going to build it like that. I am going to right click and edit family. And what we'll do is, I've already got this one open, but let's do a save as, and we'll save this family as something else. Save as family test. Let's do horizontal.rfa. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to delete this extrusion here. That's cool for now. But what we need to do is these are now named. So if you remember all the way back to, I think, the third week of ARC 252, if we're going to do an extrusion inside of a family, we need to have a reference plane for that family to see as where the extrusion is starting. So for us, that extrusion can either start from the left side of the panel or the right side of the panel. So what we'll do is we're actually going to start drawing in the left elevation. So let's do it this way. We'll draw in the left elevation, and I just got to check which one is the back of the panel. So that looks good. Back of the panel. And now we're going to go in here. We're going to go create. We're going to go extrusion, and we got to pick our work plane. So I'm actually going to pick the left side of the panel, hit OK, and now I'm going to start to draw our 1000 deep all the way down. Come back to the panel. I'm actually going to offset it here by 125. Tab to do the whole offset. Whoops. Trim over here. Trim. Okay. So, and let's hit check mark there. So first thing we might want to do is make sure that our parameters are all locked. So I'm going to lock it to the back of the panel. Come back here, lock this to the back of the panel. I am going to make sure that my dimension width here is locked. I'm going to make sure that this is locked to the top and this dimension is locked to the bottom. So we got that thickness as 125. What else do we have to do? We've also got to look at this in plan and make sure we're hitting from left to right. We've got the whole thing. So of course we are not. Let's make sure that we've got this come all the way across, hit that little lock button. Is this parameterized? It's not. So we got a blam, check mark, load into the project. Let's see what we get. Let's test it out. Project 2, kablamo. And now if I jump back to my 3D, I'm going to close. Oh, nuts. Go to my 3D. I'm going to close my plan view. I don't really care about my plan view right now. And now, why don't I go ahead and I'm going to check what my solid panel, there it is, solid panel test horizontal. Blam, look at that, right? Going to modify this, match properties. I'm going to start to pull my pieces across, right? For example, start to see, you know, maybe we want to delete these little pieces. I'm going to go ahead and delete them. I'll show you, we're going to end up with some funny geometry here. So let's be careful, but I'll show you what this looks like. So you can already see it happening. So what's going to happen? So what's happening right now with Revit is it really wants to see those joints on the edges, because you can see how it's kind of starting to interrupt the flow. So if I come back in here, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to reattach my my mullions, right? So we can kind of have the same pieces come across. Whoops. Right, so we really want that to be continuous maybe, but maybe I can grab these ones. You have to mess around a little bit. This process is not perfect, but it is definitely the best workaround that I've seen so far for something like this. And, you know, we've got the start of something kind of nice happening. Just making myself some clear panels on top. Whoops. Match properties. I want to let me see this. There we go. Blam, blam, blam. Starting to get some nice little features of what would be a very complicated to build 3D mass, right? So I know you guys have done so much work in the group that was responsible for, the kind of some of that effort that went out there. I really do appreciate, how much time and effort it takes to get that stuff going. Kudos to you for trying it out. I know that Revit's pretty good at lots of things. I would say that this is a way to do it in terms of the curtain wall. So if I jump back to the kind of standard curtain wall section that I've got here, hold on, excuse me. This is really, I'm gonna hit cancel here. This is really where I got to. All right, so you can see I've got a number of different styles of panel. This stuff takes tons of time to build, especially if you're trying to make it, build it properly. So you can see my vertical pieces, right? You can see my horizontal pieces. If I expand this up, let's see what we get. It's gonna freak out a little bit, but that's okay. Oh, I see my section box. Right, so you can see I've got some bit of complexity happening here, but what I might want to do actually, I probably want to go down actually if I'm looking at this properly. Come down instead. Let's make this, oh, you know what? I'm wrong. We should go up. I am wrong. We will go up. So because I've already, I feel like I'm on a cooking show, I've already been baking in the background and I've got these pieces already set up. So, for example, I'm just going to grab these pieces and I'm going to say blam, 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 blam. Next level, right? Next level. I'm going to grab this, go blam, blam, blam. I'm actually looking at these. I probably need some vertical pieces here. So, oh, I see what I've done here. I've got one piece for the top that has a closure on it. So you're going to need to build a ton of different families if you happen to choose this as the way you're going to build your respective models. And if not, totally cool. I love stuff like this. It can be super fun. It is very difficult and annoying to build. So, kudos to whoever decides to do it this way. I'm not sure if there's pressure to do it this way or if you guys just decided to, but pretty fun, right? So back to this. If I pick these panels, right, I'm just going to come all the way up and then I'm going to come across here. I'm going to choose this should be, I've messed something up here, but that's okay. Let's make this glass, we'll make this glass, make this glass, for example, and then let's come back here. Blam, 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 blam. Oops. MA. Got my top panel here, so I gotta make sure I pick the right one. And you could see how, I missed this one. You could see how with a kind of kit of parts, we can start to really develop a kind of pretty robust system of drawings here. So it's freaking out a little bit at the corners, but I think this gives you a pretty good idea how you might build what I kind of showcased in the other kind of piece here. We've got the 3D section copy here. So, starting to get to something like this, we've got all of these pieces, how am I actually going to start to build it? So you might be wondering, okay, cool. Yeah. But, I noticed that you kind of left these panels as a super thick piece, right? Oh, it's 1830. So 6 feet. That is true. So what can we do? Maybe we grab this and we're going to unpin it and let's make this 300. Oh, too thin. So in this case, the model that I built, the kind of family that I built is too small for this piece, but let's try something maybe a little bit bigger. Let's do 600, should be fine. Yeah, so 600 is fine. In fact, a little bit smaller. So, but you can see how everything else is still intact, right? So everything else is still intact. If I unpin this, I can move this up and I should see everything kind of follow it, right? So you can see how robust this can be. Rather than doing it as a mass, we can really start to mess with, and make good what's happening in terms of the geometry, the formal geometry inside of Revit. So curtain wall grid, maybe I want to grab a couple extra panels here. Maybe I can make this, keep this part going, right? Wonderful. So anyhow, that's just under an hour. I realize it's a ton of information, and I've got, just in this little model alone, if I come here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different families. So I only had time to build 2 today in an hour-long conversation. So imagine yourself if you need to build, 6 or 10 or 14. There's all sorts of different considerations you're going to need to make when it comes to building this. It's a lot of work. So I appreciate those of us that have tried it, and do your best. Try it out. Revit has a lot of powers. This is definitely a fun little exercise to get to. If it's helpful, I can post a link to this file maybe inside of the Blackboard site. And you guys are welcome to kind of mess around. And I do, again, caution us that it is very complicated. This is a very advanced system. So do your best with the ultimate goal of trying to get to something like this. So, good luck, guys. I know we're reaching the end of the semester here, so I'm really happy everybody kind of comments and likes these videos if you like them. And it helps me out, and I hope it helps you guys out. So that all being said, we will catch you next time. So thanks for hanging out. Talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.